Hi, this is Miss Huval coming to you with some help for your daily grammar practice, your DGP Day 2 parts of the sentence. Now, this video is actually part 2. In part 1, I went over subject-predicate pairs and prepositional phrases. This video will pick up with direct and indirect objects. So if you need help with subject-predicate pairs or prepositional phrases, please look for part 1 of this video. This is part 2. So we'll head on through the subject-predicate pair slides and the prepositional phrase slides and arrive at the direct and indirect object slide. All right. Not all sentences have direct and indirect objects, but when you encounter them, you need to know that each of them, direct objects and indirect objects, will always be nouns. This is another noun job that a noun can do. So they're always going to be nouns. Another important thing to note about direct and indirect objects is that they always come after a simple predicate. Okay? So when you're asking yourself, is there a direct object or where is the direct object, you're looking after the simple predicate and you're looking for a noun. Now, you should have marked all the nouns on Monday. You should have marked the simple predicates on Tuesday, on day 2. So all of the information you need to find a direct object is already written down in your sentences. So, to find the direct object and the indirect object, we look after the simple predicate and we look for a noun. Now, here's where they differ. An indirect object answers the who question. And an indirect object can only occur if there's also a direct object. There will never be a sentence with only an indirect object. Okay? So, if you're looking for a direct object, it's going to answer the what question most often, although sometimes it's the who question. But if there's only one noun after the if there's only one noun after the simple predicate and it answers the who question, it's got to be a direct object because you can't have an indirect object without a direct object. Okay? And as always, remember, if a noun is already doing another noun job, like the object of the preposition or the simple subject, it cannot also be a direct object. Nouns can only perform one job in a sentence. So let's put this into practice and see if we can find some direct and indirect objects. All right, check out our sentence here. The car took a hard left turn in the crash, and the impact gave the driver a severe concussion. All right, we've got a subject-predicate pair here. We've got a subject-predicate pair here. Now that you would already have marked on day 2, on Tuesday, when you do the parts of the sentence. So you already would have done that, okay? You would also know if there were any nouns because you would have marked that on day 1, okay? So, to find the direct object, you look after the simple predicate for a noun. Here's a noun. Does the noun answer the what question? All right, the car took what? A turn. It does. So this noun, turn, is your direct object. All right, now let's check the second subject-predicate pair. The impact gave. We see 2 nouns here, one here and one there. So when there are 2 nouns, you may have an indirect direct object situation. If there's only one noun after the simple predicate, it cannot be an indirect object because you can't have an indirect without a direct, even if it answers the who question, which is generally the indirect object question. So let's check this one out. The impact gave who? The driver. Gave the driver what? A concussion. So the what question is going to be your direct object. The who question is going to be your indirect object. All right? Couple things to remember. No noun that is already the simple subject or already the object of the preposition can be the direct object or the indirect object. And remember, there's only going to be an indirect object if there is also a direct object. Okay? Now, if you're looking for indirect and direct objects in your sentence, pause now and use these helpful tips to find them. All right, here's some other things we look for. Appositive phrases. These occur quite often. And a positive is a noun job also. So an appositive is a noun that renames another noun. It may just be a noun, an appositive, or it may occur in a phrase, an appositive phrase. Check this out. Here's an example. My brother's a noun, Drew Brees, is often confused with the New Orleans quarterback of a similar name. So do you see how Drew Brees renames my brother? Okay. So here we've got a noun and a noun. Drew Brees is the appositive because it renames brother. And in this situation, you've got the noun and that's it. The appositive phrase is just the noun. Okay? Check this one out. The president of the corporation, an ardent cat lover like me, spoke to the press about his philanthropic spay-neuter initiative. Okay? Now here you've got a noun, president. It's being renamed by this noun, cat lover. Okay? So the president is a cat lover. It's being renamed. So the noun itself is the appositive. The appositive phrase is everything that tells about cat lover. An ardent describes cat lover. Like me is a prepositional phrase that tells about cat lover. Okay? So this whole thing is the appositive phrase. The appositive itself is the noun. Nouns of direct address. These occur quite frequently too. And that's when a sentence or a phrase is addressed to a person. Students, wear your masks. Students would be your noun of direct address. There's no excuse for dishonesty, Mary Elizabeth. Mary Elizabeth would be the noun of direct address because the sentence is addressed to her. They can occur in the beginning. They can occur in the end of the sentence. Or you can have one smack dab in the middle of the sentence. That sometimes happens as well. All right, the last thing I wanted to talk to you about was verbals. Okay, verbals are verbs which are not doing the simple predicate job. Okay, they're doing a different job. They're being a verbal. So it's a verb that's doing a different job besides the simple predicate. There are three types of verbals: infinitives, participles, and gerunds. Now, verbals can never be simple predicates. And oftentimes, but not always, they occur in phrases. The verbal phrase will include the verbal, possibly its object, and anything that modifies or tells about the verbal. So let's go over each of these verbal types separately. We'll start with the infinitive, okay? Infinitives are always to plus a verb. That makes them super easy to find because it'll look like this: to go. Okay? Now, it's different than a prepositional phrase that begins with to, because a prepositional phrase that begins with to will be followed by a noun as its object, not a verb. Okay? And infinitives are always right next to each other: to go, to believe, to work, that kind of thing. All right? Now, one thing that's interesting to note about an infinitive is that it can function as a different part of the sentence, okay? So the verb becomes an infinitive, and that infinitive can work as an adjective, an adverb, or a noun. Now that'll blow your mind right there. But all we're trying to do right now is find the infinitive and the infinitive phrase. When we diagram, that's when we'll work on what job it's doing. Okay, just know that infinitive is to plus a verb. It's a verb acting as the verbal. The specific verbal type is an infinitive. Now, let's look at our example. Everyone wants to go with me to the beach. The infinitive is to go. To the beach is not an infinitive, even though it has to, because beach is a noun, not a verb. Now, to find the infinitive phrase, you're going to consider what tells about or modifies the infinitive. So, to go is the infinitive. With me tells about to go. To the beach tells about to go. So all of those things are going to be in the infinitive phrase because both of these prepositional phrases modify or tell about to go. Okay, so we put them in parentheses and we mark them as the infinitive phrase. Now, if I were to ask you what the infinitive is, you would say to go. If I ask you what the infinitive phrase is, you would say to go with me to the beach. All right, so let's take a look at participles now. Participles are verbs that are not being simple predicates. Instead, they're being participles. Okay, and participles act as adjectives. All right, so finding them can be a little tricky. It's not like looking for 2 plus a verb like you do with an infinitive. They can have many forms and they can have many endings, but they always function as adjectives. They're verbs working as adjectives. That's what a participle is. So let's take a look at this example. She wore a freshly pressed dress to school. Pressed is a verb, but here you see it describes dress. What kind of dress is it? Freshly pressed. So this verb, pressed, is acting as an adjective to describe dress. That makes it a participle. Let's get another example. He saved the photo pressed safely into his yearbook. Here again, pressed is a verb. It's something you can do. But here, it's telling about photo. What kind of photo is it? The one pressed safely into his yearbook. In this situation, the participle occurs in a phrase because safely and into his yearbook describe how it's pressed. So this participle occurs, in a participle phrase. This is an error right here. Ignore infinitive phrase. It's a participle phrase. Alrighty? So when a verb acts as an adjective, it's a participle. When you have 2 plus a verb, it's an infinitive. The final type of gerund is, a verbal is a gerund. That's when a verb acts as a noun. Now, these all end in ing, which makes you say, oh, well, they must be easy to find. Not necessarily, because participles can end in ing as well. So the test of whether or not a verb is functioning as a verbal called a gerund is whether or not that verb is acting as a noun. They can do any noun job that a noun can do. So a gerund could be the subject, the object of the preposition, or the direct or indirect object. Let's take a look at this example. A warning was posted near the dangerous pothole. Warning is a verb. In this particular sentence, though, it's functioning as the subject of was posted. Who or what was posted? Warning. So when a verb is functioning as a noun, has the ing ending, we know it's a gerund. All right? And that gerund is doing the noun job of being a simple subject. Let's look at this one. A warning near the dangerous pothole saved my car from damage. Once again, warning is a verb. Okay? But it's acting as the subject of saved. Who or what saved my car from damage? The warning. But this particular gerund has a lot of stuff that modify it or tell about it. Tells about warning. Near the dangerous pothole tells where the warning was. So all of these things are going to occur in the gerund phrase because all of them tell about the gerund warning. All right? So if I ask you what the gerund is, you're going to tell me warning. If I ask you what the gerund phrase is, you're going to tell me a warning near the dangerous pothole. In this situation, warning doesn't have anything that tells about it except so it doesn't really have much of a gerund phrase to go along with it, but this one does. All right, I hope this video has helped you to learn about the parts of speech. Thanks.